the triangle pouches I tend to make in 2 sizes. So this size, the smaller size, is an ideal size for coins, for keeping just a few bits and pieces in your bag. I attach a little clip so it can be clipped on the inside of a zipper pocket onto the zip pull so it's easily found. That does make a really nice size for a coin pouch. And then the slightly bigger size I actually use for things like my clips. And this one, while you can put a clip on if you want, I've actually just got a little loop on mine so that I can hang it on my pegboard because it's got my clips in it. So the 2 sizes that I actually make from the sizes of the quilting rulers because it makes it a lot easier. So this size is done with a 4.5 quilting ruler, so I literally just cut 2 outer pieces and 2 lining pieces with this size, and then the larger size is done with a 6x6 quilting ruler, and again 2 outer pieces, 2 lining pieces in this size. And it does make, as you can see, quite a difference, like 2 different, quite significantly different sizes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the 6-inch one today, but it's exactly the same as if you do the 4.5-inch size. Same seam allowances and exactly the same way that you'd put it together. So I'm going to make a start. So all the bits that I've got is I have 2 outer pieces, which I am actually using upholstery material, so it isn't interfaced. If you're using a cotton, then I would interface it. If you're using anything sort of like this that's got more body, more structure to it, I wouldn't interface it, it won't need it. And 2 lining pieces exactly the same size. So these have been interfaced with the medium interfacing that I have on my website. That was because this fabric is quite light. If you were using a cotton that was slightly heavier, slightly thicker, you might not actually need to interface it. So if it was quilting cotton, I would interface it. Anything heavier than quilting cotton, I wouldn't interface it. It will be fine, you won't need it. So I have here, it's about a 7-inch zip that I've got here. You can use continuous zipper tape and just put the zip onto it, and I would use around about, again, 7 inches, and you'll see why in a bit. I've then got a little bit of ribbon to make my loop, so you can either just have it as a loop, or you can have one of these little, I think this is a 3/8 clasp, and then this would just feed through, and then that will get sewn in so that the clasp is attached. So we'll make a start. So I'm going to start off by prepping my zip. So I don't know if you can see there, but my zip actually stops and doesn't go into the top seam here. I found the first few ones that I made, putting the zip into this top just made it really thick and bulky, and it didn't sit very well. So I've changed it now, and then you can see how nicely that sits at the top. It looks much neater. So how I do that is I'm just going to measure down, so around about, because this is a pre-made zip, I've obviously got the little metal, can you see the little metal bits on the top? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure down about half an inch, maybe it's just a little touch more underneath. and just make a couple of lines on that zip. Can't get the camera to focus. Anyway, there's 2 little lines there, and that's going to show me where to turn this zip. So what I do is I fold it back on itself and pinch, and then push out at a 90-degree angle so that it meets at the top, and just put a little pin in. Again, hopefully you'll be able to see that. So again, I fold down on itself and pinch, and then fold it back 90 degrees. So basically that folded line sits along those teeth. And again, I'm just going to put a pin in. Oh, missed it. And I'm just going to check that that meets at the top so it's nice and even, and then I'm going to put a few stitches in each side to keep it together. And then just do the same on the other side. And I put my needle down first before I take the pin out, and then my needle keeps that zip in place as I'm sewing it. I'm just going to trim off, and I'm just going to square off this zip. And just use the lighter just to burn the edges where I've cut, just to stop that fraying. So that is the zip where the edges have been turned so that they're nice and neat, and then we'll make a start on the outer. So if your fabric has a nap, so if you're using like a velvet or anything like that, make sure that it's facing the same way. Obviously if it's directional, make sure that it's facing the same direction as well. Yeah. So this one has slight lines going horizontally, so I can see that that's the same direction. And I'm just going to mark down 1/2 inch on either side. I'm just using a heat erasable pen here. So our seam allowances are going to be 1/4 inch, so that's the same on the 4.5 inch triangle pouch as well as the 6 inch one. So because our seam allowances are 1/4 inch, I'm marking down 1/2 inch, because what that means is by the time it's stitched and it's turned, that then pretty much sits at the top. If you put the zip at the 1/4 inch mark, you would sew it into the seam still and it wouldn't sit right. If it was too close to the seam where you then turn it through, again it wouldn't sit nice and flush. So 1/2 inch is a really good start. So I'm going to start with this one here. So the marking is on the right side, and I'm going to baste one side of the zip so that the edges line up together, and I'm just going to do that at the longest stitch length that my machine does. And I'm going to hold it nice and tight, but I'm not going to pull it too tight. If you pull it too tight, it'll go quite wavy. So you just want to pull it taut so that it sits nice and flush. But not too tight that it causes any tension. And then while I've got it on the basting stitch length, I'm going to then do the other side. So this is the one where the mark is on the left, and I'm going to match up the edge of that zip to just on or underneath that line. Just hold it in place. And again, you can use more clips if you want to keep it in place, and then just baste that down. So you're keeping your edges of the zip and the edge of the square in line. Just cutting any loose threads off. So we have our two outer pieces and our zip basted to it. We're then going to add one of our lining pieces, so right sides together, matching up those edges and sandwiching the zipper in place. Just make sure that your zipper's lying nice and flat. Change your stitch length to a construction stitch. My construction stitches are usually always about 2.5 to 3. It just depends, but I'm using 2.5 today. So I'm just going to stitch this together using 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you can use a zipper foot if you need to here. And again, while I've got it on the construction stitch length, I'm going to do the other side. So right sides together, making sure they match up those edges, and stitch down at 1/4 inch. I'm going to change my stitch length to about 4.5 because that's what I top stitch at, and we're going to top stitch these edges. So I'm going to top stitch without the lining inside the top stitching. So you want the seam and the zip, the edge of the zip to be facing underneath the lining. And I'll just finger press that. You can use an iron, but I won't need to with this one. Just move everything else out of the way, and at about an 1/8 of an inch seam, about an 1/8 of an inch, you want to just top stitch down at your top stitching length. I'd like to say mine's between a 4 and a 4.5. And then you want to do the same on the other side. So move this side out of the way, and your seam and your zipper edge faces underneath that exterior fabric, and you're keeping your lining fabric out of the way, and just top stitch down. Changing that back to a construction stitch. So both of those are top stitched down. I've turned that so that my zip is facing right, it's not all twisted. And what I'm going to do is put these together. So you want to make sure, like I say, that your zip isn't twisted, it's all nice and straight. And I'm going to sew this edge and this edge together. So this edge is a 1/4 inch seam allowance. This edge with the lining pieces, take it slightly over a 1/4 inch. That will mean that your lining will sit ever so slightly smaller inside the pouch, so the lining will sit a little bit better as well. So I'm going to sew this side first at a 1/4 inch, and my stitch length is on about 2.5. And then the lining pieces I'm going to sew probably at about 3/8 inch, so just over the 1/4. We mustn't forget our little clip. So like I say, if you're just wanting to put the loop in, just fold the loop in half. This is about 2 inches of ribbon, and the ribbon is 3/8 inch. And I'm just going to sew it, I'm just going to baste it to the top here, so it sits, so it can be done on either side, it doesn't make any difference, but I do it just behind where the top stitching is. I'm just cutting off any loose threads. And the most important bit, move your zip inside the pouch, because if you cut your zip off here, you're going to cut your zipper end off as well. So I'm just going to open this seam ever so slightly and finger press it open, and the same with the lining. And I'm just going to cut the excess of this zip off and just do the same as what I did before, and just use the lighter on the edges just to stop that unraveling. So you want this seam here to meet the middle of your zip, so right where those teeth are, and then you want the lining to do exactly the same. So open that seam up, match them all together and clip them all together. And then we're going to sew along this seam, so both the outer and the lining pieces are sandwiched together, and we're going to sew it all in one at a 1/4 inch. Just trim that seam allowance down and snip ever so slightly into those corners, making sure that you're not going through your stitching. And then you can open your zip fully, so it makes this a lot easier. And how I do this to make sure that my top sits nice and flush is marry up the two edges where I've top stitched, is I get them to meet and I clip that, and then I just clip the rest of the outer fabric, and I'm going to sew from basically here, so I'm catching in both of these edges here. I'm going to sew from starting there to the outer corner. I'm not worried about my lining just at the minute. I'm going to do that bit first. The reason I do that is because if I start here and I sew down, especially sometimes if you're using heavier fabrics that slip, some upholstery fabrics sometimes have a tendency to, if they've got these sort of like rubber backings, sometimes like this one has, they can sometimes stretch out. And what you can find is if you start and stitch here and stitch all the way down, by the time you get to here, your seams could end up sort of sitting misaligned. So if you have them meeting exactly as your starting point, so I'm basically going to put this under the machine and just start it there in the middle, and I'm going to sew along at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then basically what I do is I flip it over and I start at exactly the same point again to do the lining, but we need to leave a gap to pull the pouch through. So I'll start here, I'll sew maybe it's about 2 inches and then stop, and then sew from about 1 inch away from this corner all the way to the edge. And you can increase your seam allowance a little bit on this one as well, just to make that lining a little bit smaller. So you would start at your 1/4 inch here, and then if you wanted to take your seam a little bit bigger, you would just run it so that it went slightly larger. So I'm going to snip my corners, obviously making sure that I'm not cutting through my stitch line. And when you cut your corners, what you want to do as well is you want to take out about 1 inch or 1.5 inches along that seam as well, where like towards the corner, and that will help it sit nice and flush. And then I'm just going to take out of where all of these seams meet, I'm going to reduce the bulk there as well by about half. So once all your corners are snipped into, like I say, being careful not to go through your stitching, you just want to turn it through. I'll pull out this corner, this top corner first. So make sure that's sitting nicely. And then you push out these bottom 2 corners. And again, you can just use a pin or use like a pokey tool to make sure these corners are pulled out properly. Then at this top seam here, I'm just going to roll that and sort of press it with my fingers so that it sits nicely. And then we just need to close up this hole. So I basically pull it nice and taut, and what happens is those seams will roll to the inside, and then I just nip it closed. So I basically start where I stopped stitching and started stitching again, I'm closing up that hole there. Then just push your lining in, making sure it's sitting well up into this corner here, pushing these corners out. I give this seam a little bit of a roll with my fingers and just press it, because obviously I'm using an upholstery sort of type fabric. It's not particularly like really thick, but it is quite thick. So I'm just rolling that with my fingers and finger pressing that shut, and then that zips up beautifully. So can you see how nicely the top of that looks? So it isn't, this zip isn't sitting inside this seam, it isn't making it really bulky, but it looks nice and neat. And then that's the inside. So see, this is a perfect size for your clips, and I've got another one here that I have my other clips that I use, my little silver clips. They're a perfect size for that, and they do just hang on my pegboard. And then, like I say, the smaller size is an ideal little coin pouch size, and it's a great way of using up bits of scrap material, and especially if you have got these two size quilting rulers, because they do make the perfect size. But you can do them any size you want as long as they're square. So you could do 5 inches, 5.5 inches, 6 if you wanted, you know, a much bigger one. If you had a lot more clips than what I do, you could do 6.5, 7.5. But just bear in mind that if you're increasing by 1/2 inch, it'll increase all the way around. So that will, so you know, that's 4.5 and that's 6, and there's quite a big difference. So it will jump up quite a bit in size. So hope you found this helpful. Drop me your comments in the comments box below if you make one, and if you're part of the Facebook group, feel free to share any of your makes in there. So thanks for watching. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe to see my next video when it's released. I'll see you next time.